So can you tell us more about the Restaurant Act and walk us through the decision making? So um, we've been in the midst of this pandemic now for 6 months. I agree with you. Obviously, it's not ending anytime soon, and you had to make a host of very difficult decisions around different teams, different restaurants, where it sounds like you've closed several for good, but of the 70, many you hope to reopen. You've reopened many under a limited capacity, where it sounds like you've brought back about 30% of workers, and they're likely doing a lot of takeout and curbside. They're not bringing people in. So, what does the decision to keep a restaurant open look like? How flexible have you found landlords to be in terms of, let's say, those 87% of restaurants who obviously don't have the revenue coming in to pay rent? If you're a landlord, I'm thinking, well, okay, this restaurant can't pay me, but if I foreclose on this restaurant, then am I really going to get a new tenant in during this time? Probably not. But it seems like a lot of these landlords themselves often owe money in various ways, like they've financed their property. So even if they wanted to forgive the tenant, they might have a hard time doing so. And I'd imagine you're even having those kinds of conversations with some of your landlords.
Me personally, and I know it's been many people trying to guide small restaurant owners that maybe we were not so good in understanding how to renegotiate with a landlord. We need to understand that many landlords are suffering too. We need to recognize this, number one. Many landlords are maybe they own the buildings where the restaurant is, but maybe they have to be paying the bank also the loans on the property they acquire. And we are all together on this. But it makes a lot of sense to understand that if a landlord is not willing to compromise, at the end of the day, that restaurant will end closing. And that landlord is not going to be finding anybody to take over that space anytime soon. So myself, we've been able to negotiate. Obviously, I'm very lucky because I have a very good financial team around me that brings me wisdom. But we've been negotiating our different leases, and overall, we found good landlords willing to compromise. And the compromise is all of the above, from postponing some payments to even taking away a few months off the table, going maybe from some fixed rent structures to more percentage fee structure. So everybody commits. It's many options that everybody should be exploring. But I know it's been good people out there trying to give small restaurant owners that maybe they had the savvy on adapting to these new situations that can help everybody used to find compromise. I do believe compromise wins the day, and where the states or the cities through the mayors can do something to bring certain logic, I think will be in the best interest of everybody. I don't see America again with every single corner, every single storefront shut down. If we want to have economic growth again, we need to position the businesses and especially restaurants to be able to be part of that economic growth post COVID-19. So in the early days, everybody's familiar now with the PPP, which was an early idea that White House, Congress put forward. The idea was okay, but as we know, all of a sudden we realized that the restaurants, we were becoming the unemployment facility instead of taking care of the payroll through the traditional unemployment office. All of a sudden, the restaurants were doing this, but people thought that, oh, this is great. This is coming to the restaurants. Well, it didn't. The restaurants, I was very happy because we were able to be paying employees. Me, I was able to get PPP. Again, it's good to have a good team of advisors and lawyers and that knows how to navigate those waters. But many small restaurant owners didn't have that power. and many of those PPP were not, didn't go to a small restaurant owners. So I think a very small percentage, around 8, 10, 12% only of what we call the independent restaurant, the IRC coalition, the independent restaurant coalition. The vast majority of restaurants didn't got any PPP 8 at all. So the Restaurant Act is an act that is being bipartisan support, which is rare these days, but the food somehow brings everybody together to the table. Breaking bread still means something, and everybody understands the value that restaurants bring across every community in America, every state. And PPP was more focused to provide relief to those restaurants, 500,000 restaurants and more, all across America. That the idea was precisely to give this grant that they could be forgotten, that will be for the restaurant owners to be able to pay rent, restaurant owners to be able to do investment into the cost associated with running restaurants through this pandemic. The amount of money we have to be investing on gloves, on masks, is just crazy. Use the new setups outside, the separation between tables. This is extra cost in a moment that the income is not coming. So overall, the Restaurant Act is just trying to do this, to put $120 billion in the hands of more than 500,000 restaurants across, where restaurants can have the freedom to use it, depends what they need it for. Some maybe to renovate the restaurant under the new pandemic. Others obviously to pay salaries, to pay rent, to pay farmers, to pay bills. And I think has many other things. I recommend everybody used to Google Restaurant Act, and you'll see more the details, but overall is used to bring relief to the more than 500,000 restaurants across America. Also, I've been pushing forward. I was one of the founding members of the IRC, the Independent Restaurant Coalition, but I very early on, I focused myself on Feeding America, and I realized that this was an emergency, a different type of emergency. This is not hurricane, this is not an earthquake. The restaurants were not affected, was not destruction, but we were shut down. So we had many Americans that were hungry, that were about to be hungry, or hospitals that need somebody to be feeding them. Who better than restaurants to do this? So World Central Kitchen, we had almost 3,000 restaurants across this pandemic, almost 40 million meals, where the money we were receiving from people supporting our feeding efforts, what we did was different this time. We began partnering with restaurants across America, more than 40 states, and pay the restaurants so the restaurants could be open, the restaurants could be employing people, the restaurants could be paying rent, the restaurants could be buying from the local farmers. All of a sudden, $1 multiplied by 4, because it was covering many other problems at once. That's why we push for the FEED Act. The FEED Act is simple. Why we don't recognize that we have an emergency that is beyond the economic and the health emergency? It's a humanitarian food emergency. And by investing in restaurants through FEMA, once the emergency is declared, supporting mayors and supporting governors, and where those people, especially the mayors that they are at the front lines, they can be activating those restaurants to feed the shelters, to feed the hospitals that they had to shut down the food operations, the homeless, elderly homes, first responders. It's a smart idea where every dollar coming from the federal government will be multiplied by 4, tickling down the economy and helping everybody. You feed the people in need, in the process, you reactivate the economy. That passed Congress, and there's the HEROES Act. Pelosi was a big supporter, but more important, we had bipartisan support. We had Davis in Illinois, we had Thompson, we had McGovern, we had Hurd, who sees bipartisan support. And in the Senate, we had Tim Scott, South Carolina, Kamala Harris, California. We had many more. All of a sudden, a good idea that needs the support. Past Congress is sitting on the Senate, but unfortunately, the people in charge of the Senate right now is not very interested these days in bringing relief to American people.
So the FEED Act is part of the HEROES Act, is that right?
It passed early on, but as you know, it's been sitting now for weeks, months in the Senate.
It's a great idea. When I saw restaurants shift to feeding hospitals and shelters and the rest of it, and it employed people, I'm sure the people who were eating the meals were incredibly grateful and appreciative, and the suppliers to the restaurants. So it is a win all around, and it goes to show what you said earlier, which is that restaurants are so vital. And it should be bipartisan because everyone loves restaurants. Who doesn't love a restaurant? Thank you for listening in. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. If you did, please do subscribe to Yang Speaks and click on notifications so we can let you know every time we have a new episode.